Welcome everybody, and welcome to this video on the Neptunia series. I'm making this video because I think it is this series that I think has had such a, and I hate to say this, a falling off. However, I still think it's a good series. I know that they're working the next mainline game. They have the next number entry, but as I said, they are taking their time with it, and it's been a while, but you know, looking forward to that. So once the next mainline series game comes out, it'll determine what I think. Okay, so I put these eight here because these 8 are not really needed to get into the series, and as a matter of fact, these 4 down here are completely delisted. And the whole goal of this video is to try to figure out where we could start playing Neptunia, and then go on from there. So obviously, if you only care about the gameplay, then start with V2. However, the problem with starting here is that V2 does require a little bit of knowledge of Mark II and Victory, so I want to put it here. And V2 Realize is also a case of interesting choice here. There's nothing wrong with starting with V2 Realize. However, V2 has all the DLC except Million Arthur. You're going to have to use some illicit methods to obtain that. And also, the problem with V2R is that while on a technical level it is a better game, it's not the best place to start, especially this version, because of the VR events, and because it does technically spoil itself at the start of the game. As a matter of fact, V2R assumes you played V2. Hyperdimension, I mean, it's not really needed in terms of how to get into this game, but it's also a good spin-off, so I'm torn on this one. I don't know if to put it here or here. I mean, the gameplay is solid, but the problem with this one is that it doesn't do a good job in explaining itself or what the series is. Gameplay-wise, it's still good. And then another interesting choice would be Victory and Rebirth 3. I'm going to be treating the Rebirth titles as interchangeable with the main game. So where's Rebirth 3? I'm trying to find it. Is Rebirth 3 just not here? Oh, it's here. Okay, good. Top Nep is okay, if you want to put that. Yes. So, Rebirth 3 and Victory are... I don't think they're a good starting point at all. I think that those games are really hard to enjoy, especially considering the fact that it assumes you know who the characters are at the start. You really should play Mark II first at that point if you're going to play Victory, but there's nothing wrong with starting with Victory. It's still a tried and true Neptunia game. And while I do have... it should be weird to put this as okay to start, but Victory and Rebirth 3 is not. But the thing is that V2 does technically have a prologue where they explain who the characters are. And that's the good part. Now, where I think you should start... Okay, don't start with this game. Because for most of you, if you're watching this video, you're probably watching the video in English. So if you can't speak or read Japanese, don't try with this. You're going to be so lost. But where to start? So you should, if you ask me, you should either start with either the original or Mark II. I guess you could start with Go-Go 5th Gen game Neptune as well. And the reason I say this is because if you only want to start with the main series, then Mark II is where you should start. If you want to start in the release order, then this game is the best one to start with, the original. However, if you want the original game with a nerfed story, but what many consider to be more fun gameplay, then either Reverse or Rebirth 1 is fine. Both of these games, I think, are worth the beginning. I know that there's a lot of animosity towards Reverse because it's a remake of a remaster. That remaster is based on a remake, and this is a remake of this game. So it's a bit of an inception here. I don't know if that's the word. But the idea is, if you've never heard of the series, then this game or this game are the best to start with. Now, if you don't want to hunt down an old console, then Rebirth 2 is where I think you should start. Action Unleashed is absolutely not needed. There is no plot relevance. It's a sequel to Rebirth 1. And that's about it. Super Neptunia RPG is actually a great place to start, as while it does have the same issue that the originals have, it still gives you a good glimpse of the characters, and it has a good story, but I don't know. I think you could start with that, but I would say it's okay, because it doesn't give you the full picture. Blonde plus Neptune versus Zombies, it's an interesting choice to start with, but I don't think that you should start with this one. Versus Sega Hard Girls is actually okay, because it's effectively Rebirth 4. It's an evolution on the Rebirth combat, but it also adds a run button and a baseball collecting side quest. And I do think that outside of the original game, this one has the best writing. It is a spin-off though, so if you're not into that, or if you're just not a fan of the Sega Hard Girls characters at all, then don't worry about it. Neptunia, I think, is the start of the franchise's collapse, and this is why I oftentimes do not know to recommend this series. It's because of Neptunia Virtual Stars. This game, to me, was the epitome of jumping on a fad. Now, that's a bit ironic here, because this entire series is about, the game industry and the lore of the game industry. It's a parody of it. But it was never, blatant. As in, even if you don't know the history of the game industry and just read Neptunia as Neptunia, it's very enjoyable. If you don't know what a VTuber is, which at the time that I got the game, a lot of people didn't know. Nowadays, it's a bit harder to, hard of a pill to swallow. There's a lot more people who know what those are. Or if you just aren't into it, it's really difficult to play Neptunia Virtual Stars. And the worst part is you can't even play as them. Okay, here I thought I was going to be able to play as Korone Inugami, but no, you can't. She's just a... You can get her cosmetics, I believe. But I don't think Neptunia Virtual Stars is all that. I don't think it's a needed game at all. And it also plays vastly different. It's a shooter game, technically. I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with this game. Because on one end, the game is good. However, I don't think that it's worth starting there. Sisters versus Sisters. If you're on Xbox, this is your only starting point, really. So, sure, this will be a should start here for Xbox players. Is the game great? Well, it pretty much did a simplified Final Fantasy VII Rebirth combat system, where you're in the battle and you're switching characters on the spot. You're able to command them with a separate menu that pauses the combat. Thinking about it, it really did just copy 7 Remake, didn't it? In terms of its combat system, albeit it is simplified, so I should note that. I guess if you're on Xbox, that's where you are. That's, well, I wouldn't put this as not needed. Instead of not needed, they should say not needed / not a good starting point. You could start with any of these games, and you could have a good time, but I don't think it's a good starting point. Action Unleashed, for example. Man, that story is a complete nothing burger. There's nothing in it. The gameplay is good, but it's refined in Versus Zombies, and then it's refined further again in For Goddess Online. And then you get the Evolution, which is the Senran Kagura game. I'll put the Senran Kagura here on a purely technical level. It should go here, but I also don't condone censorship, so I would put it here. In the case of Sisters vs. Sisters, it wasn't censorship on the side of Compile Heart and Idea Factory. This was literally the ESRB just saying, Hey, you forgot to get the game checked for language. How dare you? Like, you pricks! You absolute pricks for doing that. But, you know, that's just the way it goes. And then we have Devotion Noir. I don't think it's a good starting point. It's a good spin-off, but I just don't think it's a good starting point. You know, thinking about it, I don't think you would put Blonde plus Neptune vs. Zombies as a good starting point either. Okay. Now I gotta reorder this. Then, Action Unleashed. And that follows into Tag Mention. And then that gets evolved again with this game. Then, Neptunia is such a hard game for me. Because gameplay-wise, it's not a bad game. It's honestly okay. But it's everything about it and what it represents that bothers me. It is where I think the series fell. After that game, the series was never the same. And it really does show. Now, on to the next game, Game Maker Revolution. Personal thoughts aside, because personally I wasn't too big on it. I enjoyed the beginning of it. But then the writing just took me out of it. Honestly, this is the first Neptunia game where I didn't care about the story. It was an evolution of the Sisters vs. Sisters combat, which I liked. I do like Sisters vs. Sisters' gameplay. But the writing, I just didn't like it as much. And as such, you know, that's a more personal thing. Personally, I wasn't a fan of it for the writing. But the gameplay is good. If you're on Xbox, then this one and this one, so Sisters vs. Sisters and Game Maker, are the only options you have. So in other words, this is where I think you should start. If you're down to hunt old systems, then Mark II or the original. If you have a PC only, then these two. If you're a PlayStation 5 owner, then Reverse. And if you're an Xbox owner, then SVS. Then we move on to okay starting points. Like, you could start with any of these games and have a good time. I mean, if you're a Switch owner, then I think these are, with the exception of Sega Hard Girls, these three are your only options besides SVS. Really thinking about it for a second, if you're a Switch owner, these are the only two Neptunia games you really have access to, unless you're Japanese. And even then, at the time of this video's recording, the Japanese versions are bugged up the ass, so it's not worth it completely yet. Maybe when we get the English releases, it'll be fixed, but not yet. Game Maker Revolution, for the gameplay, it is an evolution of the Sisters vs. Sisters gameplay. I just wasn't a big fan of the story. Hyperdimension Neptune vs. Sega Hard Girls gives you a solid fundamental grasp of the gameplay. It gives you an idea of what the writing is like, but it does mislead you into thinking that this is what Neptunia is like as a whole, especially the modern games. Because the modern games are so far removed from the older games, with the exception of Reverse, that it's not even funny. If you take the characters as they appear in Sisters vs. Sisters and compare them to how they act in Mark II, it's night and day. They are two different casts. You could start with these three. If you're Japanese, then Reverse 1+. If you're a PS4 owner and don't have a PS5. V2R is okay at the starting point, but it does spoil itself and it cuts a lot of content. Four Goddesses Online, if you're into the more hack and slash gameplay. And I think this version is still the best version of the 4 hack and slash games. You could say that Kager Wars is here, but I just can't justify censorship of that magnitude. It's ridiculous. Victory is a perfectly fine place to start if you only care about the RPG gameplay. But if you care about the story, do not start here. For whatever you do, don't do that. And then Four Goddesses Online is just a really good hack and slash. So this is how I think you should start the Neptunia series. If I was going to say what order you should play them, because this is the answer here. This is where you start. If I want to go over the order to play the game, let me open a notepad or something. Notepad. Don't look into that. If I'm gonna go into like how to play it, so for release order. Main only. Super Dimension fan. Then it'll be canon. Simplicity. And then Simplicity canon. Then as much. Then I would do as much. And gameplay. So the gameplay one is strictly for people who just like the gameplay and don't care about the actual writing. So it'll be V2 into Sega Hard Girls into Neptunia RPG. Instead of as much, they should say action. So for the action game, you should start with For Goddess Online. Then go to Senran crossover. Then it'll be tag mention. And then if you still like it, then action U. So this is how I would do it if you're a fan of the action gameplay. Oh, actually, I forgot. Technically, these other two are considered part of the action genre. SVS. And Game Maker. Then For Goddess Online. So, if you're like that, then that's your order. If you want just the simplicity, so this is a case of simplicity in terms of this what you have. So let's just say everything on one system. Let's say it's PC. So Simplicity Canon PC. I guess I should do the same for PS4 and well, not PS4, PS5, Switch, and Xbox. So if you're an Xbox player, it'll be SVS into Game Maker. If you have a PC, I guess like Simplicity PC, it'll go Rebirth 2, then Rebirth 3, B2, then SVS, and then Game Maker, Windows Store. Why is that on the Windows Store? And then these one can be Steam/GOG. Now, I should note that the reason Rebirth 1 here is because this is considered the simplicity. And honestly, this is all you really need. Canon plus adjacent. If you're a Switch owner, then you should do... I'm assuming that we do get the Rebirth trilogy, so it should be Rebirth trilogy, followed by V2, followed by SVS, followed by what is the thing? Game Maker. I guess in between the Rebirth trilogy and V2, just for the sake of not getting burnout, you could play Super RPG here. If you're a PS5 owner, then you do Reverse, followed by V2R, then SVS, then Game Maker. So after that, For simplicity's sake, if you only care about simplicity, then I would just do... what was simplicity again? Simplicity is just, it'll be HDN, Mark II, then Victory, then V2. So if you only care about the main idea of the combat, the turn-based games, these are the 4 you really want to play. If you want canon plus canon adjacent, it'll start with Mark II, followed by Victory, followed by V2. In between that, we'll have 4 Goddess Online. Followed by that, it'll be SVS plus Game Maker. Then, after that, it'll be the Super Dimension fans, so HDN, played by, then Rebirth 1. Then, you would do Action Unleashed, Action U, and then you'd play Reverse to reset yourself. So if you're only a fan of the original story, I think you should play it in this order. If you don't care about any of the other dimensions besides the Super Dimension, then here you go. 3 copies of the same game, plus a spin-off that takes place in that dimension. And then release order is just release order. So there you go. This is how I think the Neptunia games should be introduced to somebody. If you think you have a better idea, then let me know. But for me, I think that this is just the best way to do it. This is for the sake of trying to get someone into the series. No, I think I didn't finish gameplay. So then RPG, SVS. That's really it. I think that if you just care about the turn-based gameplay, or just want some of what I think are the best the series has to offer in terms of strictly mechanics, then I would do these ones here. Mark II into V2, into Sega Hard Girls, into Neptunia RPG, into SVS. I know that these lists don't make sense if you care about the lore, but that's why canon plus adjacent is here. And that's also why I have the release order up here. I guess if you want canon adjacent, you do Victory, then Hyperdimension. Because it's an alternate version of the Victory timeline. It's still Ultra Dimension, but not the Ultra Dimension from the games, if I recall correctly. So this is how I would do, getting into Neptunia, depending on what you have. If you have a PC, then Simplicity PC, this is your go-to. If you only care about, if you have all the systems, let's say you have all the systems, then Simplicity is where you go. If you just want the main gist of the series, and you just want turn-based combat. So that's going to be it for this video. Have a nice day.